Lucy Chow spent 15 years in banking, but the real secret to wealth, it wasn't taught there. And the kicker, it's not about working harder or cutting back. So why the hush-hush? Everyone screams, earn more, spend less. But what if that's a lie? What if your financial stalemate isn't about income, but a mindset you never chose? Lucy had the degree, the job, the plan, yet wealth felt like a locked door. She wasn't reckless, she was cautious, frugal, and that was precisely the problem. Most people believe finding the right job, earning more, will somehow magically make the pieces fall into place. But Lucy's story begins where most financial advice ends. Growing up in a working-class Canadian household, money was revered, feared, and never wasted. Her father juggled 3 jobs for stability, not freedom. College was mandatory. Dreams were negotiable, especially expensive ones. Acting? Forget it. Finance? Not even on the radar. The message was clear. Get a job, don't complain, and save every penny. And so she did. Her post-grad telemarketing gig was a brutal, humbling crash course in rejection and resilience. Eventually, Lucy landed in the investment world, surrounded by big money and sharper suits. But here's the irony. Even in finance, she didn't feel wealthy or in control. She earned a great salary, but was paralyzed when it came to using that money to generate more. Why? Because, deep down, the old family script was still running. Don't risk, don't lose, just accumulate. At home, she debated the cost of an extra side table. At work, she hesitated to invest, even in ideas she believed in. She could write a check, but her mind screamed, what if it disappears? The fear of going backward outweighed the possibility of moving forward. It wasn't logic, it was programming. Financial trauma passed down through whispers, compromises, and unspoken sacrifices. And like most people, she didn't realize it was still running her life until much later. You might recognize that voice in yourself. Maybe you've missed out on experiences, ignored opportunities, or delayed choices, not because they weren't smart, but because something inside whispered, you can't afford to lose. This is the invisible inheritance many of us carry, and Lucy carried it too, until she started to unlearn it. But to understand how, we need to expose the silent trap that snares almost everyone raised with caution, the quiet error that masquerades as responsibility. There's a trap that rewards you in the short term, earns you family praise, and even feels like financial maturity until you realize it's keeping you broke. It's called defense. Lucy did everything right. She saved diligently, avoided debt, and never spent on anything unnecessary. That's what she was taught. That's what most people learn. But here's the catch. Saving without strategy isn't wealth building, it's just hoarding. And hoarding is rooted in fear. That fear wears a mask. It looks like prudence, sounds like responsibility, but in reality, it paralyzes action. Lucy wasn't lazy. She was terrified of losing, so she kept her money parked in low-yield accounts, never working for her, never growing, and she's not alone. According to the Federal Reserve, over 50% of Americans don't invest in the stock market, and a significant portion keeps their savings in traditional bank accounts earning less than inflation. Not because they don't know about investing, but because they've been conditioned to avoid risk at all costs. The irony? In a world where inflation silently erodes value, inaction becomes a form of loss. You think you're protecting your money, but you're letting it shrink, slowly and silently. And the longer you wait, the wider the gap grows between those who took calculated risks and those who clung to false security. Lucy's wake-up call didn't come from a crisis, but from clarity, realizing that financial safety was costing her more than any failed investment ever could. That's the part they don't teach in school. You can master spreadsheets, earn a 6-figure salary, and still be broke, mentally and materially, if your default is always preserving, never deploying. Lucy wasn't failing. She was following an outdated script, and to break it, she needed a new principle. Not a trick, not a shortcut, but a shift in how she viewed money itself. Money isn't just a tool, it's a mirror. It reflects what you believe about risk, control, and possibility. For Lucy, The real transformation didn't happen when she earned more, but when she stopped treating money as a life raft and started treating it as a team member. This shift from accumulation to deployment wasn't easy, but it changed everything. She started questioning the narrative she grew up with, that saving is safety, that investing is gambling, that money should sit idle, untouched, in case disaster strikes. The truth? Stagnant money decays. Inflation doesn't ask permission, it just consumes. Lucy realized she needed to make her money move, not recklessly, but with vision. And that's where she discovered angel investing. Not through a corporate mandate, but through curiosity, through discomfort. Angel investing isn't just about picking startups. It's about trusting your ability to assess people and potential. Lucy didn't start big, she started small. She joined a women-led angel network where the average investment was just $5,000, enough to be meaningful, small enough to be possible. But more importantly, it reprogrammed how she saw capital, not as something to endlessly protect, but something to allocate, to activate. This is where the metaphor becomes clear. Saving is like storing seeds in a jar, afraid to plant them. Investing is putting those seeds in the earth, knowing some won't grow, but the ones that do could feed generations. That's what Lucy started doing, with startups, with real estate, with global exposure. And it wasn't about chasing returns, it was about reclaiming control. She stopped fearing the unknown and started building relationships with it. This is where most people freeze. They think they need $1 million to start, or a finance degree, or perfect market timing. Lucy had none of that. What she had was a willingness to be uncomfortable, and discomfort, when channeled, becomes leverage. Lucy wasn't unique in her potential. She had colleagues, same schools, same degrees, even bigger salaries. But this is where the paths diverge. One of them, let's call her Rachel, never made the shift. She kept her money tucked away in savings, avoided anything that smelled like risk, and believed that real investing was for people who already had it made. From the outside, Rachel looked stable. No debt, decent job. But behind the numbers was a silent erosion. For years, Rachel told herself she'd invest later, after the promotion, after the house, after the next election cycle. But later kept moving. Meanwhile, inflation was doing its work. While Lucy made a $5,000 angel investment and doubled it in 3 years, Rachel's untouched savings lost nearly 15% of their purchasing power in the same period. The difference? It wasn't effort, but positioning. One took imperfect action, the other waited for certainty, and it gets worse. While Lucy was learning how capital flows, Rachel was learning how to stay busy. Meetings, deadlines, goals that never really moved the needle. She worked hard, harder than most, but effort without leverage is exhaustion. Lucy, on the other hand, started building a portfolio where one win could change her trajectory. The difference? It wasn't genius, it wasn't luck. It was simply the willingness to redefine what safe really means. Here's the part most people miss, but it might be the most important. Lucy didn't stop being cautious, she just became intentional. She didn't invest in every shiny idea, she picked founders she believed in, bet small to learn fast. And slowly, her mindset shifted from, I need to protect everything, to, I need to position something. That's what Rachel never did. She waited for clarity before acting. Lucy acted, and that created her clarity. But there's a deeper layer, something that shaped them both, but only one broke free. It has nothing to do with bank accounts or job titles. It's older than that, more hidden and more dangerous. We'll get back to that shortly. First, let's talk about the environments we choose and how they silently shape what we believe we deserve. Lucy didn't just change how she used her money, she changed where she lived, and that made all the difference. Most people underestimate this. They think mindset is built internally, but environment shapes what feels normal, what feels possible, and what feels out of reach. Lucy moved from Canada, a country with high taxes and a cultural restraint on ambition, to Hong Kong and then Dubai, places where the rules of money, opportunity, and growth played a completely different game. But there's something more about these places, and it's not just the tax rates. I'll get there. In Dubai, wealth wasn't a fantasy. It was infrastructure, a vision you could walk through, a skyline built on sand in just 3 decades. In a place like that, people don't just work, they build. The government doesn't just react. It sets the tone and watches entrepreneurs align with it. Lucy found herself surrounded by people who didn't ask, "Can I afford this?" They asked, "How can I multiply this?" The contrast was shocking and liberating. In Vancouver, banking meant managing deposits and mortgages. In Dubai, it meant venture capital, sovereign wealth funds, angel syndicates. The same word, money, carried a completely different energy. Not because Lucy got smarter, not because the system was easier, but because she'd entered a context that demanded bigger thinking. This shift didn't make her better, but bolder. But there was still something she hadn't confronted, a belief buried beneath all the strategies. Here's the loop I promised. Environments can propel you, but if you're carrying the wrong blueprint inside, even the most abundant place will feel like a trap. Lucy's final transformation didn't come from geography, but from confronting the silent contract she'd signed as a child. The idea that wanting more was dangerous, selfish, or unrealistic. That mindset doesn't dissolve with success. It hides in it until something forces you to look closer, and that's what we need to unpack now. Because chances are you're still living by a rule book you never agreed to. Lucy's wealth didn't start with a better salary. It started the day she questioned the blueprint she didn't even know she was following. That's the part most people skip. They chase strategies, tactics, side hustles, but they never stop to ask, whose beliefs am I living by? And here's the truth. We all inherit scripts. Some noble, some protective, but most outdated. And one of them almost cost Lucy everything. I'll show you which one shortly. Growing up, Lucy learned that money was earned through sacrifice, that financial comfort was rare, and that wanting more made you ungrateful. Her parents weren't wrong, they were survivors. But survival skills don't always translate to wealth building. In fact, they often do the opposite. They create patterns of guilt, hesitation, and fear disguised as humility. This doesn't just affect how you spend, it shapes how you negotiate, how you invest, how you see your own worth. In her investment banking job, Lucy was explicitly told she didn't need a raise because she had a husband. Not because her work lacked value, but because her identity didn't fit the system's expectations. And for years, she internalized it, didn't object, didn't question, until she started seeing the pattern repeat, not just in her, but in other women, other immigrants, other quiet high achievers who'd always been told to be grateful, not assertive. But there's something more insidious. The voice that holds you back doesn't always sound like criticism. Sometimes it sounds like reason. It says, be careful, don't be greedy. What if it doesn't work? It wears a suit and uses numbers, but behind it is a child who watched her parents stretch every penny and vowed never to waste. Breaking that voice doesn't mean ignoring your past, it means honoring it and then choosing a different future. This is where the shift happens. Lucy started documenting her value, not just for performance reviews, but for herself. She tracked her contributions, her instincts, her judgment. And with that clarity, she stopped asking permission. She entered negotiations with data, not emotion. And when that didn't work, she changed rooms entirely. But there's a deeper strategy she used to accelerate her growth, and it's one you can apply today before the day is over. I'll show you how shortly. It's tempting to think change requires a course, a mentor, or a major life event. But Lucy's transformation didn't begin in a boardroom or a bank. It began the day she chose to act without certainty. And that's something you can do right now, today, not next month, not when you're ready. But there's a caveat. I'll get there shortly. First, take inventory. Not of your net worth, but of your financial reflexes. Do you flinch at investing more than $500? Do you feel a subtle guilt when you earn more than your parents ever did? Do you opt to cut expenses instead of increase income? These reflexes aren't random, they're echoes. Until you see them, they own you. So start here. Write down 3 beliefs about money you absorbed growing up that no longer serve you. Don't filter, just name them. Next, identify an asset class you've avoided, not because it's wrong for you, but because you don't understand it yet. It could be angel investing, index funds, real estate, or even your own skills. Pick one. Learn about it for 30 minutes today. Not to master it, but to confront the fog. Action kills fear, but only if you move before the fear wins. That's the real challenge. And here's the part nobody talks about. Wealth is social. You can't outrun your environment unless you disrupt it. Find one person, online or offline, who's already doing what you want to do. Send a message, leave a comment, ask a question. Not to network, but to reconnect your mirror. Because until you change who you think you're allowed to become, every dollar will feel like borrowed time. But here's that caveat I mentioned earlier. You can do all this, feel a spark, and still revert to comfort tomorrow unless you anchor it. So here's your anchor. Commit publicly. Comment one thing below this video that you will do in the next 24 hours. Not because I asked, but because your silence is expensive. And your action, especially the small, strange, and quiet kind, might be the moment everything starts to shift. You've come this far, but we're not done yet. There's a final piece that ties Lucy's whole story together and reveals why this isn't just about money. It's about identity, and that's how we'll end.